Hey, it's Dave. Welcome back to my channel. The song you're hearing is not Steely Dan, but the song that inspired the song Gaucho. It's a song by Keith Jarrett called Long as You Know You're Living Yours. I believe Keith Jarrett later sued them and got a third writing credit, or his name's one third on the thing. I don't know if he got the third or what he got, but he got some writing credit. Um, Here's also another Steely Dan borrowed piece. This is Horace Silver, a song for my father. And you can hear clearly that they borrowed that for the intro to Ricky Don't Lose That Number. I just wanted to show those two pieces because everyone's always giving Led Zeppelin a hard time. It's like, hey, look, everyone does it. It's actually probably more common in jazz than anything. But I was watching a couple of other people posting comments about Walter Becker's passing and about Steely Dan. And I came across a guy who I used to follow and I don't follow anymore. Mainly because every time he talks, he always talks in like modal. Is like, oh, that's Lydian. It's like, and if you've watched any other videos in my page, you'll know that I hate that. You don't need 7 names for one scale. And when you're dealing with 6 different kinds of altered scales, I mean, not necessarily altered, but when you're dealing with, melodic minor, harmonic minor, major, harmonic major, and double harmonic major, you'd end up with 42 different names for the 6 scales. It's like, really? So I just can't stand it, so I don't watch it. But then he started talking about Steely Dan and how they were a rock band at first, and then became more jazz by the time. They introduced some jazz into the Royal Scam, and then by Asia, and I'm like, only a fool would say that on the first album's a jazz song. I think there's a lot of jazz influence from Jump Street, from them coming out. I think they were a little bit more rock oriented because they were a rock band, but I kind of think, and this is just my opinion from interviews I've heard and just from what I see, is that Becker was more of a rocker and wrote more of the lyrics. I know Becker wrote Bodhisattva, like that was his baby, and I think Fagen was definitely taking more of the helm. And I say that because you can listen to Gaucho and then go right to the Night Fly, and they're cohesive. Like they sound like, like Asia, and then Gaucho sounds like the next, like a natural progression, if you will. And then the Night Fly sounds like a natural progression from Gaucho. So I definitely think the later Steely Dan stuff is definitely more Fagen influenced. Not lyrically, but musically. Anyway, so I did want to say something about that I thought that he was off base. I mean, I think your Gold Teeth 1 and 2 are both very jazz. There's a lot of jazz there. Bands like Steely Dan, if they open you up to other things like jazz, then I think that's a great thing. And, there's some great albums that I think would turn people on to jazz. And I kind of wanted to talk about them as well. There's an album by Guru. Now, Guru was the rapper in the band Gang Starr. And he did a record where he brought Donald Byrd and a lot of Blue Note artists together. And he did a rap album that incorporated some jazz. And I think that's a great record. And Dia Davenport sings backup on it. And I love India. She's from the Brand New Heavies. She's great. And then, there's other things that you get some jazz influence from. I remember, God, it was like when Guitar Player magazine, and I had to have been like 13 or 14, and I was reading an article about a song on an album by Al Di Meola called, the album was Elegant Gypsy, and I bought it, and I was like, oh boy. And I remember playing it like every night going to bed, and that was kind of like my introduction to jazz, before even Steely Dan, and I was listening to it, and there's certain things that I got out of it. I got the use of the flat 5 in lead solos. I really picked it out and got it out of him there, and that was really nice. And there's so much other stuff. Like when Steely Dan, when I first got into them, like I got into the major nine chord, that thing I talk about in the Josie approach video, where he plays a chord and the five of the chord becomes the one of the next triad on top of it, and he doesn't play the third in the chord, so it's just the one and then the 5 7 9, which is nice. Five major 7 9. So there's a couple of jazz albums though that I thought I would recommend that I think if you're a Steely Dan fan and you wanted to dig a little deeper into some of the classics, first of all, I would highly recommend Miles Davis, "Kind of Blue." Obviously, it's an album everyone loves. I love Bill Evans on the piano on that record more than anything. Actually, I'm not a huge Miles fan. In fact, I don't like the tone of his instrument, and for me, that's like everything. That muted trumpet sound doesn't do it for me. I just never liked it. Freddie Hubbard is a trumpet guy that I love. The Freddie Hubbard album I would recommend is called "Ready for Freddie," and I love this album. Every song is great. You can hear Freddie on even what's that song? There's a song called "Zanzibar" by Billy Joel, and he does that great trumpet solo in that as well. "You Must Believe in Spring" by Bill Evans is a favorite of mine as well. It's just a piano, bass, and drum, just great. The song "The Peacocks" is a great song. I just love it. Another album, actually, I think almost from the same year, 61, is Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers "Mosaic." That's another record that I really love. Then there's some that you may not have heard. "Uptown Downtown" by the McCoy Tyner Band is great. That's a great record. I love Larry Carlton's first album. "Pointed Up" is a monster. I mean, that sounds ridiculous. But "Holdsworth None Too Soon" is a really good record. Oh, and that also reminds me, John Coltrane's Giant Steps album. Between the two songs, Giant Steps and Countdown, you have a lifetime of learning. You can rack your brain for hours just thinking about it. It's daunting. Giant Steps is probably, in my opinion, the most important jazz song. Just it's just a monster. And it's basically an augmented triad that the keys go between B major, E flat major, and G major. And it's constantly changing keys, and it's a lesson in 2 5 1s like you read about. I mean, when I think of the song, from now when I hear it, because I've had to analyze it and break it down for students, all I hear is, 1 5 1 5 1 2 5 1 5 1 5 1 2 5 1 2 5 1 2 5 1 2 5 1 5 1 5 1 2 5 1 5 1 5. That's how I hear the song now, because I've had to break it down and do all that stuff, but I didn't play anything today. I know a lot of people keep posting stuff up for video. And I kind of, it's hard for me because what happens is I play in a band and I do an acoustic band, and so I'm constantly learning new songs, and then I have to learn a solo or to do something that somebody asked me to do. I have to make the time to try to figure it out, and I kind of got sidetracked because I was listening to some songs from Gaucho and the Glamour Profession, and that Steve Kahn guitar solo at the end, just those little notes in between. I just love what he does, and it's not something so difficult. It's over the section that goes from C minor, E flat major 7 to D major 7, and then it changes keys and it goes from D minor to F major 7 to E major 7. So it's that constant, obviously the D minor and the F major 7 stay in the same key of D minor, but then that E major 7, so he's switching and doing that, that you can do it, but he does like that pentatonic half step down. And it's just like in the right spots, and his note choices are great. I mean, it's awesome. What can I say? Steve Kahn did a hell of a job on that. And I was driving today and I was listening to it. I'm like, who the hell is playing this solo? I love it. And yeah, it's just great. It's great stuff. Also, you should check out the Hoops McCann Band I think it's called the Hoops McCann Band plays the music of Steely Dan. I think that Steely Dan is a great starting point to jump off to find some of the jazz in the complex harmonies that you might enjoy. Gino Vanelli was another one that used to have some really nice changes and came from a jazz background. But I'm with the populace, I guess you would say. I prefer to have the flavor of it, but not so much the always the hard jazz, like bebop and whatnot. And I enjoy some of the jacuzzi jazz stuff. Yeah, I think it's light, but I think David Sanborn and Bob James had an album called Double Vision in '87 that I think is just great. I thought Bob James had a great album in '86. Obsession. I really liked that record. So I do like some of the jacuzzi jazz stuff. I played the Grover Washington Jr. song, Wine Light, and that's kind of the jacuzzi jazz that I would call it, and the Bill Withers song is on that album too, the one that he sings. Um, and Marcus Miller's on bass. What the hell's the name of that song? Uh, Oh, just the two of us. Yeah. So, and that's on that record. Anyways, I hope Donald Fagen still makes music, still writes, and I hope that somehow he brings back Gary Katz to the fold to get that sound back. Anyway, if there's a jazz record you think I should check out or that you think would be interesting, please put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. So far, everyone that has commented, I always read them and check out. I checked out that Eye to Eye record. Somebody posted that Gary Katz produced a record. Other than I mentioned the Raw Stylus record, which I love. That Eye to Eye is a little '80s for my taste. The sound sounded okay, but the song didn't. So I was just kind of like, so I stopped kind of looking. But I always like to see what else people comment as far as what's good and what I should check out. There's a record, and it's very hard to find, it's called Mark Harvey and the Aardvark Band, and there's a song called Scamology that is just great. I mean, it's awesome. One of my all-time favorites. I love that record. Oh, there's so much good music. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Very good.